Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the commercial art community and specifically the very reactive nature of a particular artist by the name of Stuart Semple. Today's episode is going to be a little bit similar to that in that there's a good amount of background that I have discovered through looking into this topic that is part of what I want to talk about. So it's almost just as much that as it is the thing that's happening currently. So just heads up, we're talking about the horse thing. The entire story centers on this one particular breed of horse. This breed of horse is called Przewalski's. This is how it's spelled. And the possessive is part of the name, it seems like. So it's like you'd say, I have a Przewalski's horse. My brain doesn't like any of it. More to the point, in the interest of showing mercy to editing me, who also has to go in and custom edit all of the captions every time, I'm not going to be saying the name that often. Again, heads up. So starting with background, these horses are unfortunately endangered and were actually about 70 years ago extinct in the wild and nearly totally extinct. In the wild, they originate back to Eastern Europe and Central Asia. They are commonly also called wild Mongolian horses. And I believe they're actually the only true wild breed of horses to still exist. This sent me down a whole separate thing on the differences between wild and feral animals. The terms wild and domesticated refer to the breed or the species as a whole, while feral and tame refers to the actual individual animal. So dogs as a species are domesticated, but you can still find feral dogs individually. That's not a wild dog, that's a feral domesticated dog. Whereas wolves are a wild species, but I guess theoretically, you could tame a wolf and make it a pet. I feel like I've seen movies about that. So generally, when you think of wild horses nowadays, those are actually feral domesticated horses that like just escaped and ran away. But this specific horse breed is, again, I believe, the last wild horse breed to exist. And as I mentioned before, in the mid-1900s, they nearly went fully extinct, with the last reported sighting of them in the wild at the time in 1969. However, since right about the end of World War II, people had started to notice like this is a problem, and so they had started to breed them in captivity. Then in 1977, in the Netherlands, a foundation for their preservation and protection was officially started, and that allowed for people across the world to connect with who had these horses so that they could, because you're talking about like there were a couple hundred of them. So getting them in contact with one another to help with breeding, hugely important. Not just for keeping them alive as a species, but also for preventing just raucous inbreeding. As of today, it looks like there are a little over 2,000 in total across the world, which I think technically takes them off the endangered species list, but they're still on the endangered species list. And the very cool thing about this, which has started in the 90s and has been continuing up through literally this month, is the ongoing effort to reintroduce this horse into the wild. Most of them have been reintroduced into wild areas of Mongolia and northern China. And the most recent set to be reintroduced were 6 mares and 1 stallion from various zoos across Europe, and they were reintroduced to the wilds of Kazakhstan. You're talking closer to even 80 years in total of work to bring this species back from the brink of extinction, and that is amazing to be able to say that they've done as much as they have. Now, because they are endangered and because there's so much effort going into their breeding and reintroduction, these horses are very specifically and heavily tracked. They're all registered in some way, and their movements are tracked as they travel across the world. Now, allegedly, in the last, I assume, few years, 4 of these horses were in the US, I assume for a breeding program, something like that. It is incredibly difficult to find any actual firsthand account of this happening, but everyone agrees that it happened, so okay. 4 of these horses that were being transferred in the US, 3 mares, 1 stallion, went missing. I don't know when, I don't know from where, I don't know exactly why they were here, I don't know who's responsible, I don't know anything. So that pretty much takes us through setup. We've got an incredibly rare breed of horse. It's tracked everywhere that it goes. They travel around so that they can do breeding because they're actively trying to repopulate this breed. 4 allegedly went missing in the United States, 1 male, 3 female, sometime somewhat recently, I would assume. Hello, really quickly before I continue, as you know, I am supporting Operation Olive Branch, and this is a group of artists who are with their families, a total of 15 people, hoping to raise some money so that they can get to a point of safety and so they are able to provide for themselves and their families. We've made some amazing progress in the time since I took this over. It was nearly 10,000 below this at that time. I'm so thankful. Thank you all. If you are able to donate anything or consider sharing, that would be amazing, and I would really greatly appreciate it. So What happened? Earlier this month, a TikTok user named Kinsey, whose family seems to own a ranch or manage one, posted a video saying that they had found one of these horses at a kill shelter. Kinsey went on to say that they and their family saw pictures of this horse, which they have named Shrek, online, and they immediately recognized him as one of these horses, and so they went and got him immediately. They claim that after picking Shrek up, they put him in quarantine with a friend of theirs for about a month, and that he's since then been with them for about 2 months on their property. And they also claimed in this video that he was 100% purebred. They'd had him DNA tested. Kinsey then went on to say that they did contact the zoo and relevant officials, and they were told they could probably keep him. This really threw people off because they were like, what do you mean keep him? Because there are two main issues with that. First being that if he's purebred, then overwhelming odds would say he's the stud that went missing, and they're gonna need him back for breeding purposes, right? Like, I'm assuming he has an owner. I don't know if that gets voided out if you lose one for a long enough time. Like, if you lose your horse and it shows up like 5 years later somewhere else, like, is it still yours, or is there, I don't know. But especially in this particular case where there is a concerted ongoing effort to boost the population, like, what do you mean you're gonna keep it? The second issue is, to my understanding, these horses aren't tameable. Like, even in captivity, they are given a wide berth and left alone. They are not good pets. They're very aggressive, they're very territorial. So the idea of a random family, one comfortable with raising horses or not, which this family does seem to be comfortable with, having one of these horses is concerning to a lot of people. This started turning the tide of conversation a bit toward Kinsey about this horse. To make things worse, this was happening almost exactly at the same time that guy on Twitter found that fish in his yard and killed it. People were up in arms. I want to stop right now and say that Kinsey is, I believe, a minor. Do not harass them. Don't bother them. Their comments have had to be turned off on their page, and that sucks. They are not, I don't believe, the person in charge making the decisions about this horse. Leave them alone. Then it turned out there was another potential one of these horses at a rescue in Utah. Lazy Bee Equine Rescue and Sanctuary had a mare that they suspected might be one of these surrendered to them also in early June. They had actually posted about the mare a few days before Kinsey posted about the stud, and then when they found out that the stud was being named Shrek, they decided to name the mare Fiona, and everybody just immediately died and dove into this headfirst. However, since they only got Fiona this month, they're still in the process of getting her DNA tested, so they don't know for sure if she's 100% purebred or not. That process takes like 6 to 8 weeks, apparently. Now, I've seen people bring up that this puts Kinsey's story into question because Kinsey claims that they had the DNA test already done and that would be too fast. But Kinsey claims that they picked up the horse 3 months ago, Shrek, so that would give them enough time to do the DNA test. And my assumption is they knew or assumed it was possibly one of these horses at pickup, so they probably did it right away. But people are now wanting to see more official stuff, like the official results or just something else to believe, because I guess they just don't believe that Kinsey's telling the truth. Or they're upset because they do believe Kinsey's telling the truth and are like, why would you keep this horse then? And basically don't believe that if this horse is legitimately purebred, that no one in an official capacity from the government or zoos or preservation societies would come and claim it. The Lazy Bee Rescue in Utah, which is the best name ever, by the way, have said that they're obviously still waiting on the DNA test, and at that point they'll get in contact with zoos, etc., to get this horse to the place where it needs to be. And they are raising money both for Fiona as well as just generally they are a rescue, and so they probably rely really heavily on donations. So if you are someone who is interested in this and would like to support them, I'll put their information up here. But that's actually pretty much it as of now. Like I mentioned, Kinsey turned off their comments, I assume because they were getting a lot of harassment from people. Do not harass them. Both groups have been in contact with one another, and they have said that they aren't going to be uniting Fiona and Shrek. I'm not entirely sure why, but it just isn't going to work out, and people are quite devastated. While Lazy Bee waits for the DNA tests to come back, a lot of people are speculating whether or not it's a purebred version of this horse, a hybrid version of this horse, or a similar looking horse called a hinny. Most of the skeptical people think that both horses are probably hinnies because it just wouldn't make sense to have this incredibly rare breed show up in such random ways. And I guess we'll see.